Good morning, evening, or night, wherever you are. Welcome to WHAM today. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's drift through the whispers of today's world, one quiet thought at a time. As we wrap up Wednesday, 14th May 2025, let's see what stories are unfolding around us. China's relationship with the US has entered a new phase marked by what is effectively a trade embargo, even with positive remarks from US President Donald Trump and a temporary tariff pause. Chinese businesses are cautiously adopting a wait-and-see approach. This pause offers a temporary reprieve for businesses like Shine and Taimu, who can now increase shipments from China and restock warehouses. Goldman Sachs and UBS have raised China's economic growth forecasts following the trade truce, with the US. Beijing is also positioning itself as a reliable partner for Latin American governments amid US trade restrictions. Taipei plans to expand its influence through the Belt and Road Initiative. Baidu is planning to expand its robotaxi services to Europe and Turkey. Capital is pricing its shares at HKD $63 or $33.70 each for its Hong Kong listing, targeting around $4.60 billion. Simultaneously, BMW, Toyota, and Mercedes-Benz are recalling cars in China, while Geely is offering to buy Zeekr. China is leveraging its control over rare earth minerals in trade negotiations with the US, although American buyers are expected to remain cautious about Chinese sourcing. Shenzhen has launched a $692 fund for the chip industry and is seeing a surge in visa-free entries, up 160%, making it a popular destination for overseas tourists. China's shares are rebounding strongly, with the Shanghai Composite Index topping 3,400 points. Turning to the United States, the stock market, including the S&P 500, NASDAQ, and Dow, edged higher as inflation cooled and US-China trade relations hinted at improvement. Mega tech companies have added over $800 billion in market capitalization after the US-China tariff pause. However, shipments arriving in the United States from China and Hong Kong, worth less than $800, could face 54% tariffs beginning Wednesday. Goldman Sachs also lifted the U.S. growth forecast by 0.5 percentage point. In Taiwan, China is hosting officials from two Taiwanese allies, a move that is causing concern in Taipei. India is signaling a tougher trade stance with the U.S., drawing lessons from China's strategies. China defense stocks slumped after India-Pakistan ceasefire. Across the Atlantic, Europe should heed the MAGA memo. China's Baidu plans robotaxi expansion to Europe and Turkey. The FTSE 100 is muted, and Europe market dips as China hits out at UK-US trade deal. Saudi Arabia faces scrutiny over alleged labor abuses and preventable deaths among migrant workers at construction sites. A British Bank of America analyst has been sentenced to 10 years in a Saudi Arabian prison for a social media post. During President Trump's visit to Saudi Arabia, business leaders, including Elon Musk, Larry Fink, and Steve Schwarzman, discussed new investments. Trump cited $600 billion in deals, though actual project costs were lower. The U.S.-Saudi Investment Forum saw a friendly atmosphere between President Trump and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Nvidia is to supply Saudi Arabia with 18,000 AI Blackwell chips for a 500-megawatt data center, part of a $1 trillion AI opportunity. Saudi Arabia's Aviles is ordering up to 30 Boeing 737 MAX jets, and the Saudi Wealth Fund is expected to order 30 Boeing jets. Saudi Arabia reaffirms its multi-billion-dollar investments in the U.S. and has signed a strategic economic partnership with the U.S. Elon Musk has announced that Starlink is coming to Saudi Arabia. The MENA region saw 14 IPOs valued at $2.10 billion, with Saudi Arabia leading. Saudi Arabia faces declining revenues and increasing credit allocations, while its debt collection software market is projected to reach USD 95.9 million by 2033. Nvidia is set to provide Saudi Arabia with 18,000 of its top AI Blackwell chips. The company has also partnered with Saudi Arabia's wealth fund-owned AI startup WHAM. Following these deals, Bank of America raised its price targets on Nvidia and AMD. Nvidia's stock gains have pushed its valuation above $3 trillion, and CEO Jensen Huang's net worth is nearing $120 billion. Russia has been held responsible by the Council of the International Civil Aviation Organization for the downing of Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 over Ukraine in 2014, a tragedy that claimed 298 lives. The EU is contemplating implementing capital controls and tariffs on Russia should Hungary obstruct further sanctions against Moscow. Before upcoming Russia-Ukraine discussions, the EU is intensifying its pressure on Moscow. A report commissioned by the EU suggests the Russian economy is facing more severe difficulties than publicly acknowledged by Moscow, exposing vulnerabilities within its war economy, contrary to claims of expansion. France is warning Russia of potential oil and finance sanctions linked to the conflict in Ukraine. To bolster its coal sector, Russia intends to introduce discounts on rail transportation. In a separate incident, a Russian general was killed by a car bomb. A well-known election monitoring activist has been convicted and sentenced to a 5-year prison term. The performance of the Russian stock market, particularly the MOEX index, along with the stock values of metallurgy, mining, transportation, and development firms, remains under close observation. Further, Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar has landed in Moscow for a formal state visit. Russia's economy is reportedly under growing pressure due to its invasion of Ukraine, according to a leading economist who briefed EU finance ministers. The war and resulting sanctions are the main drivers of this economic strain. Turning to European markets, performance was varied. Burberry shares jumped by as much as 17.5% on Wednesday, while broader European markets declined after earlier rallies. However, European equities did close higher for the 4th consecutive day as the latest U.S. inflation data was analyzed. First quarter corporate profits in Europe are now projected to increase by 1.9%, up from the previous week's forecast. Overall, European stocks saw gains following a U.S.-China agreement to lower tariffs, and the dollar weakened due to the tariff truce and subdued inflation. Japan is grappling with growing economic anxiety as global free trade encounters a crisis triggered by swift shifts in U.S. tariffs and policies. The auto sector is experiencing particular strain, raising questions about Tokyo's trade negotiation approach with the United States. Both Honda and Nissan are projecting considerable declines in profits. A recent survey reveals that more than 30% of Japanese companies foresee a decrease in profits for the fiscal year 2025. Despite these hurdles, Japan is actively encouraging China to allow more foreign investment. April saw Japanese foreign equity purchases surge to a 2-decade peak, fueled by instability in global markets. Bain Capital is expanding its investment efforts in Japan amidst heightened interest from limited partners. The Nikkei 225 index recovered with a 0.95% increase in May 2025, following an earlier dip caused by profit booking. Another survey suggests that 70% of Japanese firms anticipate an increase in inbound mergers and acquisitions. Canada's Honda is delaying its $15 billion electric vehicle investment in Ontario, encompassing an EV battery plant and assembly facility upgrades. Robinhood is entering the Canadian crypto space by purchasing WonderFi for $250 million. The S&P TAIEX Composite Index saw a 0.33% increase at closing. Investment supervision between Hong Kong and Ontario will see greater cooperation. Asian markets presented a mixed picture. Initially buoyed by the US and China's 90-day trade war truce, which sparked cautious optimism. However, these gains were subsequently moderated. Concerns arose regarding potential interest rate hikes by the Bank of Japan. The looming impact of tariffs on Asian semiconductor manufacturers further dampened investor enthusiasm. Investors are also keenly awaiting upcoming earnings reports from major Chinese technology firms. Germany is witnessing a hesitancy among its manufacturers to invest in the US, even though their investment volume there significantly surpasses that of American firms in Germany. Simultaneously, Germany is increasing pressure on Moscow to implement a ceasefire in Ukraine, with the threat of more stringent sanctions looming if Russia fails to adhere. Shifting to economic developments, Samsung Electronics is poised to acquire Flecht Group, a German heating and cooling solutions provider, for €1.5 billion. Recent figures also point to a moderation in German inflation, bolstering anticipation of an impending interest rate reduction by the European Central Bank. Donald Trump's second term began with a significant overseas trip to the Middle East, reminiscent of his first term's initial focus. The itinerary included visits to the Gulf states of Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. A notable event was the scheduled first-time meeting with Syria's new president. Discussions centered on strengthening deals between the U.S. and Gulf countries. Trump's personal relationships and his family's business ventures with various Gulf Arab rulers were also central to the discussion. Allegedly, Trump accepted a $400 million luxury plane from Qatar as a gesture. Simultaneously, his family is reportedly expanding its business and cryptocurrency interests within the region. In Qatar, a delegation from Hong Kong worked to enhance trade and innovation ties with the Gulf state. Thailand confiscated 238 tons of illegally imported electronic waste from the United States at the Bangkok port on Wednesday. This marks the largest seizure of its kind in Thailand this year. The waste originated from the United States and was falsely declared as recycled metal. Customs officials stated that the importers will face prosecution. Thailand has tightened regulations on electronic waste imports to combat illegal dumping. The allure of international opportunities is drawing U.S. researchers abroad, capitalizing on research funding reductions within the United States. Nations are preparing for a potential influx of talent. Meanwhile, in Thailand, Pandora, the Danish jewelry giant, is altering its operational blueprint. The company, which has manufactured jewelry in Thailand since 1989, will raise prices and divert shipments away from the U.S. This shift is a direct reaction to trade policies initiated by the Trump administration. Poland is preparing for a presidential election this Sunday, marking the approaching end of Andrzej Duda's second term. In other news, Poland has finalized a $227 agreement to procure an advanced satellite system from ISHI. India's stock market experienced a positive day, as the Sensex rose by 180 points to close at 8130.56, and the Nifty 50 climbed 89 points to reach 24,066.9. This surge resulted in a yacht 4 lakh crore gain for Indian stock market investors, with the BSE mid-cap and small-cap indices both increasing by 1.19%. Meanwhile, in the Czech Republic, the arms industry is experiencing a significant boom. This has sparked discussions about whether the sector could potentially rival or even surpass the automotive industry as the country's leading economic force. Shifting focus to Mexico City, Emilio Perez is offering a unique DIY cooking course at Casa Jacaranda cooking school. The course provides instruction on preparing traditional dishes such as mole sauce and tacos al pastor, while also immersing participants in the local culture. And that's a wrap for today's news, because even headlines need a nap. Stay curious, stay kind, and let the noise fade as you find your quiet. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time on WHAM Today.